Okay. Have we done it? Can you hear us? Well, they're like a couple seconds behind us.
Yeah, we're gonna have to wait now.
I think it should be fixed. Um, Hopefully, probably, maybe. There it is. Great.
Yes, yes,
Okay. Okay.
amazing.
They missed all of our adorable anecdotes
Yeah,
about how time is fake. That's it. That's all you
it's
missed.
it's all serious now. There are no jokes
The
anymore.
jokes are done. We did the jokes during the silent portion of the live stream, and now,
Because again, that we always start with, "Wait, we're on? We're on? Are we on? Okay, we're live." It might have been for the best.
it's, yeah, nobody really needed to hear that. So,
Yeah,
anyway, well, we're here. Oh, let's introduce ourselves. Hello
right. Yeah,
again. I'm Nicole Sweeney. This is my YouTube channel that exists
yeah.
only for the satisfaction of chatting with my only child friend, Deboki.
Am I your? Wait, what was the emphasis on the words? Your only child friend,
Yeah,
or
only
your
child.
only?
My friend who is an only child. Yeah. Sorry, to be clear.
Got it. I like that. That's my defining trait as a friend. I
Yeah.
am. I am everyone's only child friend. One of my good friends from college, she and I, we are the in our friend group. We all we had a crew of roommates that we all hang out every year. We are the two only child friends in the crew. And when we get together, we are the ones who are clearly the only children. We always get our own room. We want our own thing, and our other friends are like, we'll just room together. It's fine.
Like, absolutely not. Share a room
Yeah.
like a heathen? Get out of here.
Yeah. I have not to do that. Uh, I'm Jamoki. I'm Nicole's only child friend.
Yes. That's it. That's who we are as people. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, I'm also on YouTube, but I also do other things.
She does other things. Her YouTube channel exists for
my
other purposes.
multi-sibling friend. You're a middle child friend?
I
You're a middle
am.
child
I'm
friend.
a middle child. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
know. Uh,
You just have a lot of middle child friends.
there's also a lot of go off and do your own for a radically different reason,
Yeah.
we're on some level we're the only children of people with siblings, you know what I mean, of people with
Yeah.
siblings. There's a kindred spirit situation going on there, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a wild introduction that has absolutely nothing to
We're in
do.
a mood.
That is us setting the tone, okay? Setting your expectations, letting you know
Yeah.
what you're in store for. Today, as we talk about Azar Nafisi's Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times. And as is often the case, first I'll begin by summarizing this book. So this book is, it is a collection of letters to Nafisi's father, who is deceased, long deceased at the time that she was writing these letters, but she wrote him letters that were they're collections of essays about different books, and she's talking about she's picking a couple books at a time as ways to talk about politics. Mostly she's talking about things happening in Iran, things happening in the US. It the letters span 2019 through 2020. And so actually I think maybe she starts discussing things like earlier days of Trump's presidency, but I think the actual letters themselves are 2019, 2020. But anyway, so that's my explanation. That's my summary of what the book is. Now, as is often the case, when I have picked a book, I will begin by saying, not sure how this is gonna. I feel like on some level I keep intentionally choosing books to break the format of nonfiction book club. It's actually not. It's not intentional.
Be like, Nicole, are you sabotaging us?
It's really not on purpose. I swear it must feel that. I know that it must feel that way now. I swear it is not on purpose. I don't actually know where to start with this one.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe the place to start, and honestly, to me, the only thing that I really know, like the only strong feelings that I have about how to discuss this book isn't so much about like the what of it as the how of it, like the bigger exercise of what she's doing here. And the way in which, one of the thoughts that I had, there's like so many different things about just this overall format of she's writing these letters and she's talking about literature and also kind of talking about political situations and like what, I don't know, what it means to like read and have empathy and like exist in a society. There's a lot of really big ideas going on here. But a thought that I kept having while reading this is that there's a lot of ways in which there's like some authenticity discussion for us to have, our favorite topic of all. Yes. Like there's something very interesting about the central construct of she's writing letters to her father, but like they're also like they're constructed essays, right? Like they're very clearly essays for an audience of us. Like there's there's an almost fictional audience in her father, but the actual audience is people who are going to read this book. I don't know if that phrasing makes sense at all. I guess.
Well, it's also it's the reader and her dad. Like and there's like a weird like I'm glad because that was like basically my central question. Like I feel like if we planned this out the way that we used to, where we would do the Google Docs the night before, we would have both just like written the same sentence, which is like what is the form of this and like how is it working for and against what she's doing in this book.
So I like how did you find that?
So I have two thoughts that are like a little bit in contradiction because I did not like reading it, but I also thought that it was like there was something at the end that I kind of liked about it because the word that I would use to describe this book, I have not read a lot. Like, to be very clear, I am not cultured in a lot of the ways that this book I think wishes that I was. So a lot of the books in this I can't necessarily respond to beyond like how I know that those books are discussed. Like I can't really engage with the way that she's understanding them. But the thing that I really liked about this book in the end, or the thing about this book that felt almost maybe kind of like cozy about it, is like the way that it felt like a conversation. Like just throughout the word I kept coming back to is conversation. There's the obvious one of her with her father, but there's also her often referring to conversations she's having with her friend Shirin. There's the ways that these books are in conversation with each other. There's the way that her past in Iran is in conversation with her present experience in America. And that's the thing that I love. Like I did a whole podcast series for Scientific American that's like just me being like, I think these two science books are in conversation with each other. And in my head, and so like that is a central part of this book that I really really loved by the time I got to the end of it. But the form of it with the letters, like the letters is clearly like if you're like that is like the most obvious manifestation of the way this is a conversation. But it just really doesn't work because there's so many times where she has to refer to her father and say like, you remember this or you must remember this. And most of the time I don't have anything to do with that. Like I don't know what that means. Like I don't know how to like engage with that, right? Because I don't know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It just feels very like forced, and for me as a reader it feels really distracting, and then it gets to a point where I'm like, I almost wish this wasn't a letter.
That's really interesting. You didn't go quite where I thought you were going to go, like when you started that, in terms of like the idea of who you remember. So I also found them just a little bit distracting, but in a really different way, like, or not really different, maybe similar, but just like I'm like phrasing it differently. But the thing that I found distracting about it is more I found it distracting in the way that it was exposition. I find it distracting in the way that like first person protagonists in fantasy or dystopian, just like other world novels explain the world in ways that should feel natural to them. Like when they comment on their society in ways that's just your world. Like you actually, if you live in this society and have always lived in this society and don't know any other society than this one, you are describing things to me that actually should be unremarkable to you. Like it's like it was that experience. Like that was the way that I found it. So I guess the thing that you said that jumped out at me was just it had nothing to do with me, which I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because the flip side of it is that there is something about it that I appreciated. Like I appreciate the sort of Okay, so there's the way in which it's doing. I feel like I'm going to feel this sort of like back and forth about so many things in this book.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I agree with what you're saying, and that it was distracting from this level of like, this is not how you would recall a memory to an actual person. Like I would say you remember. I might say you remember, and then like an offhanded, like a shorthand. Sorry, not offhand, a shorthand for the memory that I'm trying to recall and inspire in you. But I wouldn't say you remember and then proceed to tell you the whole story. Like that's not the way that you talk to somebody who you have a shared memory with. Yes, but also, the person she's talking to, talking whatever, again, the who, us, or whatever, but in her father, the person she's talking to is no longer here and isn't actually there to recall the memory on the other side. So there's a way in which this act of like, you remember when, and then proceeding to tell the whole story is like, there's a way in which I do actually understand that as like as having the other half of the conversation. She talks the first chapter about the idea of like of going on a walk, and like, you can't go on this walk with me now, so I have to sort of imagine both sides of the conversation. And because she mentions this like in the very first letter, and so to me, I don't know, that is a thing that I came around on the more times it happened, because the more it started to feel more like that to me. Like the thing that she's doing is essentially she's having the other half of a conversation, because the exercise here is, I want to have a conversation with somebody who I can no longer have a conversation with. And so I am, and she does it a lot. She does versions of this. There are more subtle versions than the, you remember when this story from my childhood happened or whatever. There are more subtle versions where she's essentially saying, you would think this, or you would think that. And like that, I think I mentioned this when I last month's live stream, when I like said that this was the thing that we were doing next. But I originally tried to read this book last summer. I picked it up and I got through maybe like 2-3 pages. It was like right after my dad died, and I was like, nope, we can't do this now. I am not currently in a space to receive this idea. But with a little bit more space, there is something in that project that I find very interesting. I understand why it would be jarring and off-putting for people. Like I understand why it would be a point of disconnect, but I don't know. It's to go to your point about how the whole book is essentially it's conversations, but it's like happening on many, many different levels. That a lot of the you remember, you might do whatever, like that to me is also, that's like fundamental to the memoir component of this book, which is I read Reading Lolita in Tehran when I was in college. I remember almost nothing about it except having the experience that you described, which is she talks about her talking about a bunch of books that I had not read and being like, I feel a little bit stupid. I feel a little bit like I have homework to do. Before this was more satisfying because I have read, not all of them, but I have read way more. I've read the majority of the books she talks about, which was really exciting for me. But listen, it might also just be because I spent the last decade, trying to recover from.
We have to come back in another 10 years.
That's what I'm saying. In another 10 years, we'll be like, aha, I've come back for you. Anyway.
Yeah, so I agree with you. So when I say it doesn't have anything to do with me, I think that's actually more related to kind of what you're saying about the exposition style. Like, that's sort of like what it is. It's like, it's jarring because it sort of does that thing where it like situates you back out, but like in an awkward way that didn't feel deliberate. I think there's a way that can be deliberate, but that's not what this felt like. I understand what you're saying. And I think so, like, there's one moment where I like kind of finally realized what it was that was frustrating me. It was like during the Atwood chapter where she says like, Babajan, you might be unconvinced by my argument. And that was one where I was like, but why? Like if you're gonna say that, I want to know why you think like he would be unconvinced, because that's interesting too, like in and of itself. Like what is it that's sort of like missing there? What is it that he would see differently? And so that's where like that filling in of that other side of the conversation, like I think would have been like really interesting.
She needs more of it. Is essentially
Yeah. That was, I think,
that specific example that you're citing is like there's a way in which that is setting up her, like I now want to explain myself more, and so I'm adding this weird, but like if you could explain to me what he would have found uncompelling, it would have been more effective. More effective as a way of getting us to the other point that she wanted to make. That's really interesting.
Okay, so like we started with like being worried that you're trying to break nonfiction book club, like just unconscious secretly. But I actually think this is like I had the same feeling reading this book where I was like, I'm not sure I know what I want to talk about, but also immediately I feel like we both latched onto the same thing with like this format question, and I feel like it's like I don't know that I have a lot to say about the specific ideas in the book. Like definitely there are some moments like where she talks about mass entertainment where I know that I'm like immediately on the other side, and she like does the thing about trigger warnings that everyone does where they like completely misunderstand what a lot of people are asking for with trigger warnings, and like a lot of that stuff I'm like, right, again, this book is cultured in a way that I am not. Engaging in conversations that I'm not. But like I think there were definitely moments where like the chapter I remember that stood out to me a lot, like, and it's like I think it was kind of my turning point with the book of like kind of feeling like not that I was getting it, but just somehow like situated more, was the third one where like again all authors that like some of them like I hadn't even heard of.
This is the one where I have not read any of the authors, is that chapter. Yes.
Yeah. But and I don't know that I know how to engage with all of her ideas, because they're so rooted in experiences that like I don't like have a lot of direct experience with in the way that she and the authors do. But like this is a chapter that's like largely about war and how we see our enemies and what like how we approach empathizing with them, and in the case of these authors like how they then translate into writing with them. It was like it was for me the chapter that like was definitely like the most challenging in an interesting way, where I was sort of like this is and I think it's like where that idea of the conversations like started making a lot of sense to me of like there's just like a lot about that chapter that I found interesting. And I wish I were better about being able to articulate what was interesting about it to me, except that it might just be that it's like, again, a thing that I don't have as much like experience that I can draw on to kind of engage with the ideas.
I think that one of the things, so being in the same boat, have not obviously also not had any related or adjacent experiences to most of what she is describing, and also have not read any of those books. But also, I think that one is the most direct in like that. Like that is the there's sort of like a fundamental tension throughout of this idea of like, you know, reading to understand your enemy is a thing that she keeps kind of talking about. But like that chapter specifically is the one where I think she's grappling with the idea, just like holding multiple things at once, and like what it means to sort of hold like really conflicting ideas at the same time, and like how do you do that exactly, and like using all of those books as a way of doing that. I think that there's a way in which that chapter felt the most direct about like some of the things that she's sort of talking around throughout. Like that one is very much like, you know, I don't like you can feel opposing things like at the same time, just like the idea of feeling opposing things at the same time. I also don't know if that is articulating it either, but I feel you on that.
No, so, and that's maybe interesting too, because I think like I said, like maybe it stood out to me because it's like the one that I have the least to draw on, but also I think it is one that like I have a lot to like think about. Like maybe it's like the one that involves reading dangerously, I guess, in the way that I also find the most uncomfortable. Like the idea of like empathizing with your enemy, or like doing that kind of reading, like, is the most challenging probably to me, despite being like an avid watcher of reality TV and having empathized with truly the worst people. But like, which is probably not what she's talking about at all. I don't think she's like worried about whether or not I empathize with like Stassi. But I do think it's like the one that maybe paralleled a lot of conversations that I do see online that like I think are about like reading perspectives that are maybe like uncomfortable in that way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I do think that there's something there that maybe is just like also really relevant to conversations that happen on like booktube and book talk about like reading like from perspectives that are like racist, sexist, all of these things, and like what is the way, like is a character who is racist necessarily speaking on behalf of the author? Like how do you handle an author? Like there's a lot of ways where even if that's not what this specific chapter is about, there's a lot of ways that I feel like the conversation in this chapter like can easily branch out and connect to those kinds of threads that we have going on in the book community.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to add to that, but I agree that is. I think there's something too that I find really interesting about the whole thing, like the way that she keeps poking at that idea in ways that, I don't know, there are a few places where, like the trigger warning is a good example, but there are a few places where I'm like, where she says some things that just like, there's a part of me just on some personal level, I'm like, no. But also, it was interesting to have that sensation in the context of this book where, like, I don't know, there's a level on which that's like, that experience is the thing that she's talking about, first of all. But second of all, there's a way in which she has, I don't know, like, life experience credentials for certain ideas that I would otherwise be resistant to hearing. Like there's a way in which there's certain things that she talks about that like my inclination is to push back on, but also this is coming from somebody who has seen more shit than I have by so much that there's a level of me being like, no empathy for those people is like off, like I like coming, like there's for me to have that reaction to her feels ridiculous.
Like who am I?
Right.
Absolutely no one. No, I agree with that, and I think the thing that she does well is like she articulates that in a way that's not about like using, like we're saying credentials. She's not using that as like she's not using that. She's like stating that to explain where her values and beliefs come from. And I think the thing that helps is that there is a consistency. Like even when she is like feeling challenged, like she's working in a way that I think points to like an underlying value that she is being consistent about. I think the second chapter especially like kind of highlighted that for me. I think like I remember the word that like I kind of like, she uses this word mulishness to describe her dad, and it like kind of like comes back in the end, and like she doesn't say it at the end, but like I wrote it at the end because I was like, yes, this is what I think like her mindset is about. Like she is very anti-ideology throughout this book, or not, and that's the thing, she's not anti-ideology because that is an ideology in of itself. She is like, she is opposed to a sort of absolutism about ideology and how people cling to ideology, where like that is different from like the mulishness of her dad to protest certain policies. Like she is committed to her values, she's not committed to an ideology, and I think that's something that is like coming up again and again throughout the book in a way that I think is really that's really interesting, and I think is really valuable, because I think we talk a lot on like this is where I feel like this book was really interesting to me because it like even if I didn't always agree with it, even if I didn't know always how to think about it, I think it was like a useful kind of counterbalance to think about how we have similar or attempt to have similar conversations on BookTube and Book Talk, and where I feel like sometimes they become really difficult, where I think we like kind of get confused about how to articulate our values on Book Talk or BookTube, or I'll just say book community. Sorry, like that just it's like on the internet. I think on the internet it is difficult to have a conversation about values. I think values are something that are inherently easier to talk through with somebody else in person who you trust, or like you have some kind of relationship with. That is something you can build online, but like once you start bringing in strangers and audience, becomes inherently more difficult. But that is. Yeah, I forget why I started going down that path. But basically just like that, I think like what I think was like right about this, and I think this is maybe, I wonder how much of this book is written, whether she knows it in like or not, in response to like kind of what you might think of as like the internet culture of books, or sort of like that sort of like what people might consider like woke or like a moral outrage kind of culture around books, which I like understand why it's frustrating to people, but also I think there are differences. Like I think there are people who approach it from a set of values. Like I mean, like we're friends with Mari, so like I'll just use like Mari as an example. But like Mari for me is someone where like I think her values are about partially like, or a lot of the way that she frames her arguments are around community, and it's about articulating like how we're contributing to a community and how we're creating the best community. And so there is for me a clear value that's being articulated there that is the foundation of the arguments that she's making, that I think is different from using books as sort of a litmus test of like, is this racist, is this not racist, like, and which is not to say that I don't think we should do that, but I think there's a point to being able to articulate what the value is that you're actually dealing with when you identify something as racist, because that's then where you get to like, is the character being a racist about what the author is trying to present? Is that the author's thoughts? Is that what are they doing with that? Like all of that stuff.
There's like she quotes Baldwin in the last chapter, but about like the idea that like not having a political ideology, but rather just having a sort of moral core, and like that's it. That's the like it's very clear that that's a thing that she's been kind of circling on as sort of a value of hers. And again, the sort of conversational framework, she finds somebody else who said the thing and is like, and uses that as the way of giving voice to, you know, very clearly and, you know, explicitly in text, her own sort of like feeling on this, on what she wants to guide her thinking. The longer that we're having this conversation, though, I have so many thoughts about everything you just said. The longer that we're having this conversation, the more strongly in favor I am actually of the conceit of the letters, because she's talking about this idea of like a feeling like the world, things that are happening in the world are on some level making her a worse, I mean, she explicitly says, making her a worse version of herself, or bringing out the worst in her. That's what she says, bringing out the worst in me. And I get the vibe from the book that a lot of this is also like reaching out for the person who was this specific part of her own sort of moral code. It feels implied to me that like that is coming from her father, that like that was something that like he imparted in her. And so there's this level of like, I'm trying to sort through this thing, and I want to like I can't sort through this thing in a way that is not like in some way connected back to him. Like he is always going to be part of it for me, part of like this idea for me. And so like how are you, I don't know, integrating that? I still think that you are correct about like your example, the specific example that you cited earlier, and there are others like it, where she references him in ways where the thought feels incomplete. It feels like you needed a little bit, bring in a little bit more of whatever sort of contradictory thing you are imagining him to have said, would have made it stronger. But I don't know. I think that is because like this is also fundamentally a memoir, which is sort of like that's. I don't know. I think as she's grappling with this, with her own kind of questions of morality, I think that it is extremely appropriate that she's trying to sort through this by imagining conversations with her father like that. I don't know. That seems
I think
right.
that makes a lot of sense. I feel like this is what's good about Nonfiction Book Club, because I feel like if I had picked up this book and kind of read the first chapter, I probably would have put it down and just been like, this book is just like not like for me, right? Like it's probably good, but it's just like not hitting me the way that I like would expect like this book to be for me. And then, but like obviously I can't do that. Like, but also the other thing is like getting the chance to talk about it, because I think I got like as I was reading each letter, I kind of like liked the idea more and more, but like was frustrated with the execution. But I think you're like, I think being able to talk it out, because like I feel also like the more we talk about it, the more it's like I feel like doing the letter, this isn't the right word, but it somehow cushions the conversation. Like it's somehow like I think it gives intimacy. And I think like you're saying, like especially like this idea of trying to talk to a family member, especially trying to talk to your parent who's no longer there, like that is like probably like you know, like that is who you want to talk to, like you want to like, and like you're saying, like he is clearly like, she's so often referring to his past in reference to these ideas that like clearly there is something about him and like everything he's done that has like had a huge influence on her. And so I think there is something like very personal about this format that is like very, very deliberate. Like that is the point, is to give something where there is an argument, but it's an argument in like this very personal context, even if we're like there as witnesses to it.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting to go back to your point about the whole thing being conversations, but like, I don't know, like the multiverse of conversations, like layered, like and that like also a piece of it is that like it's like meant to exist this way. Like there's I don't know, now like I feel like I'm maybe getting too meta with it, but there's a way in which this feels like her ideal outcome, almost like the ideal outcome is that is specifically that you go have a conversation. That seems like very much what she is, like what her, to the degree that there is a call to action here, that feels like what it is, which is also very interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, I mean, I'm putting these words in her mouth, so if you're watching.
She's not here, so.
But I feel like even the fact that there is something that we both experienced friction with the book is something that would be like exactly what she's looking for, right? Like that's part of the point of this book, is that like reading shouldn't be a frictionless endeavor. Like it should be something that is challenging you in some way. And in this case, it's like the format is not like challenging me the way that like the other books that she's talking about is challenging her, but like there's something about that is still like different. It's weird in a way that I think is good for this book. Like I think it's good that it's not like a standard kind of literary critique kind of book. Yeah.
That reminds me of the Atwood chapter where she's talking about like the different experiences that her friends have had with Atwood and how, and like there's a level of, you know, like I understand their experiences and I get it, but also my feeling is like for me, how important it is for me that I like that I am confronted, first of all, like when I'm feeling that sense of like that tension, that I'm like confronting it and like embracing it. This is now an absolute tangent, but because I mentioned this, the way she's talking about reading Atwood. The other thing that I found really interesting is the way she talks in that chapter about the right to this, like the right to her own mind, the right to sort of claim the ability to go places. Like she says something about how for her it is essential that she is able to create to like escape into the world and not only see it as sort of maybe I'm paraphrasing incorrectly here, but like not only seeing it as for its real world parallels, but also that like if you can only see it for its real world parallels, that there's a way in which that real world thing, like this is something else that they've taken from you, is sort of the like that like I will not let them also take my imagination from me, is sort of the vibe that I got from that. That I also found very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a
I keep saying
thought.
yeah because I feel like I'm not sure. Like I agree. Like yeah.
Yeah.
And like now just like flipping through, like I do have a lot of this book underlined. And at first I was like a little suspicious because I felt like everything I was underlining was quotes from other books.
Ooh.
And I was like, I feel like she is a very good quote selector, but like this is a little awkward to feel like the writing that I like the most in the book is not hers. But over time that like really shifted. I think again, like the third and fourth chapters, I think in particular, like a lot of it like dabbled in her experiences in a way that was like so distinctively hers that like it was hard not to do it. And also like reading her stories about growing up in Iran and like the rules. Like I remember one of my friends in college also grew up in Iran, and like hearing from her like some of the rules that she had to like abide by, and I was like, oh, like especially in this in the Atwood chapter where like you're like, yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's the end of my thought. I didn't have an idea that I was building to. I was just like remembering this chapter.
Remembering my friend.
I have the distinct disadvantage of having read this ahead of time. And so usually I come in much fresher.
Yes.
And this time I made the mistake of
that was
getting the reading done.
Foolish of you.
That is always a problem.
Always a mistake, really. I did actually have a thought when you were talking about this. Your friend and reminding you of her experiences, the Atwood chapter. No, the thought has left me.
Third and fourth chapters were like the most distinctly her experiences, I think, was sort of what.
That's where that thought started. That was the thing. The other thing that I find interesting about just the overall project of this book, and this I do is also something that I remember about reading Lolita in Tehran, is that it's like the idea of taking your reading experiences and like building a memoir out of them, essentially. Like I find that whole project, I'm now really, really curious to read her other books too, just because I find, I don't know, there's something really interesting about that exercise to me. As somebody who, since you mentioned Mari, we talk all the time about the ways in which our friendship is essentially just like a collection of media criticism, like that it's like that's like foundational to
you
our
guys can
friendship.
Write this book.
That's
or like you guys are like a version of this book. That idea of like the ways in which books, media, whatever, but like your experience with stories, with other people's creations, the way that gets interwoven with your own lived experience, and like the way in which you understand their work, that's like very much a part of the Atwood chapter, is like this thing about how lived experience is a factor in your experience of a work, and what, how much you can and cannot separate that out. I don't know, all of that is stuff that I am thinking about constantly. So maybe that biased me in why this book like made me think of like the book community online a lot, because I think a lot of the book, like I think I feel like I see more conversations about like trying to understand the role of the internet book community versus like book critics. But I feel like the thing that I like about the internet book community is that it is inherently a bunch of us are just like I read this book. This is what made me think about. I got shit going on in my life. Like somehow this book is involved. Like I like that really personal angle to it, and like yeah, there are ways then that's also going to be like potentially deficient, but like I don't know, that's all things. So I think that's part of why this book makes me think so much about how we talk about books online, because like that is effectively what this book is. It's like, how do we talk about books with other people? Is like you said, like kind of like how you and Mari talk about books. Like this, like also like how we talk about books now. Like,
yes,
conversations.
Yes.
Like everything is just conversations. Yeah, you know, this is like one of those books that I liked and did not. I don't like. I have a reading journal where I gave it probably like 3 or 4 stars, and I feel like the more I talk about it, I'm like, this is the best book. Like,
this is definitely one that I feel like I would recommend to people with less regard for whether or not I think they'll like it. I would be like, I want you to. I think that you will get something out of this book, even if you don't like it. Yeah. Is sort of the.
I think I would recommend this book, and then be like, you should also watch Nicole and I talk about it.
I mean, obviously, that is. I would recommend that to everyone, regardless of whether or not I recommend they read the book. You should definitely listen to our thoughts, which are so good. It's funny though, the thing too about this being a conversation and like this, this being a conversation. She's talking too about to bring it back to the letters to her dad. She's talking about like her experience of reading different books and what she thinks her dad would think of them. And that's the other interesting thing about this project too, is the way in which I feel like when I am reading different things, there is always something in the back of my head being like, what is Deboki gonna think about this thing? What is the I did not know that you were going to agree so wholeheartedly with what I said, but I knew for sure that opening with let's talk about the what of this, or the how of this book rather than the what, that you were I knew for sure. I was certain that we were going to be on that was going to be an acceptable opener.
I always love a how question for a book, especially I always love what is this book structure?
How have you done this here? I think that's also that's just a separate, the longer we do this project, there's a way in which just because we have now read so many different kinds of nonfiction books, not just I mean, I was going to say not just sub sort of category, but actually not that many. For the number of books we've read, the way that I would categorize them, the way that I would put them on shelves in a bookstore, there's actually not that many different shelves that they would go on. Yeah. There's only a handful of distinct sort of bookstore sections that I would put these books into. But they, as far as how they do those things, really different. Really different. Which is very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do the BookTube Prize nonfiction judging, and so that's where I'm oh right, there's so many other types of nonfiction books than the ones that we pick. Right. Good job.
Where have all these other books come from? The separate thing of what? Yes, there's the
what we have never talked about that I'm pretty sure, but is every year a part of the BookTube Prize nonfiction is a World War II book. I don't think we've ever done a World War II book. I don't think we've ever done a 1,000-page biography of a major figure. I think those are two that are very decidedly not in our wheelhouse.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I have some on my, there are there are
when books, your subconscious starts acting up again, we're gonna get one of those.
I do actually have one very chunky history book that I know for sure has an audiobook that's been on my shelf for a million years, but I have never suggested it for Nonfiction Book Club book because it's fucking big. I haven't picked it as my book club book for the same reason that I haven't actually picked it up and read it, which is that it's too big. I don't like the size of it. So anyway, that was a wild tangent. I don't know how I got there. Any other thoughts about this very interesting book? I love that she included her father's letter. to LBJ at the end.
Yeah, all of it was like really lovely, like as a tribute, I feel like, to her dad. Like it was very yeah, it was just like very sweet in a lot of ways, like just very, I don't know, tender. I feel like tender is the word that I'm like looking for. Like
the thing
a lot of this book,
Oh no, go ahead.
No, go for it. I'm just gonna repeat what I said.
The thing about the letter too is that there's something sort of tonally and structurally about it that's a little bit like when you meet a friend's parents or like you meet a friend's family for the first time and you start to look around and you're like, oh, I understand where all of this came from, because like there is a way in which I'm like, oh yeah, you're the father of the person whose book I just read. That checks out. Like there are just things about like the overall tone and structure of it that feel like that make it feel like this whole book, like this whole string of letters, is also sort of an answer to that, like almost that one letter in a way, where I don't know, I appreciate that as well. After talking about her dad so much, to then get to see him in writing at the end was a really a nice, lovely, tender, as you put it, lovely touch.
Yeah, this like reminds me like when I find writings from my grandfather, because he also had strong opinions. I don't know if he sent a letter to the president, but I feel like he would have. And there was like a lot of this letter that like reminded me of this, like unsolicited advice, a deep sense of conviction, and everything he's saying, you're like, yep. It was, I really loved it.
Let me tell you about how to run a country. I mean, in fairness, he did, this man ran a city, so he was not, this was maybe a little bit less, less, he has some knowledge of what he was talking about, I guess.
Yeah, and there's something also about the, like, the ending of, like, again, with a letter that, like, we don't know the likelihood that, like, it would have been read, but just, like, that's not the point. The point is, like, writing it.
Yeah, she talks about that too, about the idea of like writing that like you're sort of like writing a reader into existence, that like that concept too, that like the writing is that you're always writing for an audience even if you don't like know it or like know who they are, or I don't know, I'm butchering the idea now, but what it was, I don't know, I found this very lovely.
It sounds familiar. I feel like I must have tapped it, but I can't.
I feel like it has to have been in the last chapter, the thing that I am describing. But I can't tell you where. I did not underline or tab a single thing in this book. I had my tabs and my pen. I don't know. I don't know why. I just, everything felt, everything felt too, like we were just flowing too much from one thing to the next. Like it is, I don't know. It is, to me, like the part of the efficacy of the book, actually, that I didn't stop at any point to be like, because the thought, it never felt complete. Like the thoughts never felt complete enough for me to be like, okay, now I got to go back and like, that's you've distilled the thing here. Because again, the whole thing is a conversation. So the thoughts are just sort of like they're building and flowing in this way that, I don't know. I never felt called to stop and underline. So that's a weird experience.
Yeah, and for me the weird experience was like, because I read it ahead of time, I actually read it slowly. Like I just read one letter a day, and I really liked that experience. It wasn't like I was trying to cram, like usually I feel like I would look at a book of this size and be like, I'm gonna cram it all the night before, that kind of thing. But I like decided to kind of go slowly through it, and that was really, really nice. Like of just like kind of sitting with one letter a day.
It also made me feel like I would love to at some point in the future like maybe tackle like treat the chapters as sort of like reading, you know, like go through and read the three books that she mentions in a chapter, and then read that.
It's
That
a
chapter.
book that like lends itself well for like like that kind of exercise of like, this is sort of like a reading list kind of book, but like in a slow way, not like a here's the essential curricula or anything. It's just like, okay, well, yeah.
Especially now that like having read the whole thing all the way through, it would be and like understanding the bigger project, it would be it would make more sense to me to go, like, for example, the third chapter, which I have not read any of those three books, to go back and like read all three of those books, or even the other where like, you know, I've read both of the books in the second chapter, but I didn't read them like together in any way, so it would be interesting to go back and like reread those two books back to back, and then read the chapter. I don't know. I think also interesting just to sort of have this other experience and context for the larger conversation of the book. Anyway, I guess.
Sorry, I was trying to find that quote, but I can't find it yet. It'll show up at some point one day.
The one that I maybe I imagined. Yeah. Maybe I made it up.
No, I feel like I remember something about that. But I I'm just looking at things that I've underlined, so it might just be that I somehow missed it. But that's okay. I will find it at some point, just because I really liked that idea and I forgot about it. And I want to save it in my memory.
Yeah. It's probably, I'm fairly certain it's somewhere in the last chapter. But also maybe not. Who can say? I did read this all in one sitting because I'm not responsible. That's the reason we didn't do this 2 weeks ago when we said we were going to. It's because on Friday I was like, I don't want to sit and read this whole book. First of all, I forgot about it until late night Friday, and then I was like, this is I have a problem. I have a problem here. I mean, I actually probably could have just sat and read the whole book and everything would have been fine, but
no, I think we got to have a better discussion.
Yes.
Like doing it this way.
Doing it where I waited until I knew that I had to read the whole book. As opposed to forcing it unexpectedly. Anyway, well,
yeah. I mean, I guess if anyone has opinions or questions they want to share, now's the time to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. But speaking about like how most of the books we do for this discussion are usually on the same shelf, or like the same kind of set of shelves for whatever.
You got to give us a new shelf?
That's the word. Yeah, I am. I didn't realize I went to Barnes & Noble today to pick up the book, and it took me forever to find this stupid book because I looked in the new nonfiction section, I looked in the science section, I looked in the health section, the medicine section, the sports section. It was in none of them. This is probably, I'm guessing, our first book that was in the women's health section under the wellness cells. So that was surprising.
Women's health and wellness is coming to a nonfiction book club live stream near you.
This oh no, I'm sorry, someone's calling me. That's changing my. Okay. So next month we're going to be reading Up to Speed: The Groundbreaking Science of Women Athletes. Oh, stop calling me. The Groundbreaking Science of Women Athletes by Christine Yu.
Oh no. Everything has gone terribly awry.
Oh no.
You have utterly disappeared. You have been replaced by a wild collection of pixels. But I am... Yep. Oh. There you are.
Do you see me now?
I see you now. What a journey. I was copying and I was like trying
Sorry
to
about that. Yeah.
get the book title, but then I was like, nope, I've lost you. So
Yeah.
different
Yeah,
priority.
Like, suddenly went very wide-eyed, and I was like, was she not aware that this was the book? Like, what is?
No, you definitely told me that was the book. I knew that was the book.
Yeah.
You told me, and also I saw you mention it in your book, your video. You know, a video.
Yeah.
You're one of those.
One. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Christine Yu is a health and science journalist. So my impression of this book is that basically what it is about is the science of like physiology, sports physiology, nutrition, with regards to athletes, and about like why we know so little about it, and like kind of what advances were being made recently to hopefully kind of close that gap knowledge-wise. I was just really curious because I feel like I wanted to understand my health better. And so I've been like trying to read more nutrition stuff, but it's like very, very frustrating. And sports stuff is always so, I mean, part of it is like I'm genuinely stupid when it comes to sports science. Like I try to read stuff about nutrition and I'm just, I have done physics, I have done math, I have done biology, I have done the things, and then something about sports science that just I cannot process it. So I'm very curious to see like if I can process this book, because I would like to. I would really like to be able to understand this stuff better. Yeah.
I feel like that's a space in which there's also just a lot of people who don't really know things, who are being very loud in that space too. So yeah. I imagine there's also a way in which your brain is like, I'm both trying to process this and also process whether or not I can trust you, and I can't do both at once. Like I can't both process your ideas and also determine if you're full of shit at the same time. It's too much.
Yeah. Nutrition research is like notoriously like terrible. Like it's not great. And it's really, so like I was trying nutrition recently, and she gave me some good like advice about my nutrition, but it's also frustrating because definitely like one of the things that I was experiencing, like, being really tired around my period in a way that felt like I was not being able to work out, and she was kind of like, well, you don't like have to work out so much, and I was like, well, I like working out. It kind of like made a lot of assumptions about like, oh, like I think she assumed that I work out to lose weight, and like that I'm not doing it because I enjoy it. Like I like genuinely just like working out, and so I was like, this is not helpful.
You've
and I
misunderstood me.
Like, yeah, and so that's part of like why I've been trying to read more in this area. And like the common like theme that has come up is that people like have a lot of assumptions about how women's bodies work that are really just like, that were just like a common idea that gets flipped, like that the people who are trying to learn this frame it as is like scientists considering women to just basically be small men. And so that's like not super helpful for a lot of us. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that next month. We don't need to do this book club now.
You know, listen, we're ready. We're ready to do the book club now. Session. Yeah, so that's
sit here and read, like listen to the audiobook, like next scene.
Yeah. Well, join us next month for that, I guess. Yeah. And that's all. I guess we'll put actual date and time and stuff we'll post it. It'll be next month sometime. Yeah. So
yeah. We'll post it on the Discord, on the Substack thing, newsletter.
All of those places. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.